Welcome and thank you for joining the Jack Myers Leadership Conversation today. I'm a little nervous today because this is such an important issue. Continued lack of recognition of the value of the 55 plus, boomer plus audience, consumer. There's an institutional bias. There's a systemic bias. There's a recognition of the importance of the audience, of the consumer, but yet a continuing lack of investment in marketing directly to them rather than marketing around them. My guest today, Peter Hubbell. Peter is a well-known columnist at Media Village of the On the Age of Aging column, theageofaging.com, as well as founder and president of BoomAgers, the largest boomer-focused ad agency, I believe, in the world. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jack.
Just share a bit about the perspective that brought you to found an agency focused on the boomer audience and what your experience is day to day in leading this.
Well, it's interesting. You just mentioned the obviousness. Ken and I were talking, we were together about 12 years ago. I founded BoomAgers 2 years after that meeting. Ken is the most inspirational person in the space, very evangelical. And what we talked about way back then was not only just the obviousness of this, right? The opportunity, the dimension of the opportunity, but the fact that a very talented creative industry, and Keith can vouch for us here, was failing to step up and execute effectively and authentically against this audience. I refer to the importance of language, emphasizing the AGE in language. There is a language of age, a way to talk to people, a way to speak to positivity and optimism, and that wasn't being done. And at the same time, the world around me, I held a big job at a large holding company, agency group. The world around me was getting increasingly specialized, and I said it would be a great opportunity to specialize in a consumer rather than a connection tactic, and to bring more craft to this emerging space. And I think the other opportunity in terms of what makes me most excited about what I'm doing every day in this business is that I felt that my work would finally have a purpose, that we could bring dignity and respect to aging by using the clout of the marketing community, brands, companies like P&G that are always on the leading edge, Hollywood, et cetera, to begin to put the right imagery, positivity, normalization out there around age. And I think later when we talk about, ageism and what are we going to do about it, I think we have to have a very serious conversation about how we harness the power of media to make a meaningful difference here. But that was my impetus, and it was bright eyes, brimming with hope, and it hasn't always been that easy in this space. And I think that's why we're here to try to evangelize around it.
And Peter, with ageism being clearly a form of bias, and with bias having been elevated across society, culture, and media as a primary issue. And the definition of it being more focused on ethnicity and gender, where do you feel ageism fits into the bias story today as the culture is evolving?
I think, I'm going to speak to that, Jack, from the standpoint of our industry, right? All of the people who are tuned in here. I think there's when we use that term bias, it's accusatory. I tend to, when I talk about ageism in our business, I refer to it in a positive way. I like to talk about envisioning an age-agnostic future of media and entertainment. And I think I'll show an example in a moment of some brands that I think are being very good at being age-agnostic. But I think the reason I shy away from saying that to my peers in business is I think it's a subconscious bias. Yes, it's a bias just the same, but I think that the reality is we live in a society that covets youth. Advertising is a young business. When I first got into it in the 1970s, I was warned, be careful, it's a young man's business. Not only was it a young person's business, it was a young man's business. And so I just think that it's always been a young business. There is a unintended bias to feel more comfortable communicating with people that are like you. You bring more empathy and understanding, right? Clients have always wanted our agency staffs to have the diversity that mirrors the diversity of the audience that we're creating messages for. And it's hard when agencies are filled. I think the average age of an agency is 27 and falling. It's hard to get those people to walk in the Indian's moccasins, so to speak, to understand what it's like to be a person of age. But even more deeper than that, to get them in an industry that awards you for creativity and a belief that creativity is the domain of youth, to get them to want to work on the projects for the older demographics that might trickle their way into the agency. You know, it's you're going to get ahead by winning creative awards, and the belief is that the creative awards are going to go to the fun, witty stuff written to millennials.
So you've heard Susan talk about the fact that her audience is more active online. You've heard, of course, Ken talk about the demographic and consumer realities of the value of the audience. From an ad agency point of view, do you find you're able to break into mainstream campaign advertising, or are you put in a niche that has a very limited priority within the marketing world?
Yeah, it's been very hard over the course of 10 years to get a mainstream brand to want to be inclusive of people of age. People always ask me to cite examples. There's very few out there of mainstream brands that are doing it. So certainly there's pharma. We are working with a lot of brands, with organizations who have prioritized the boomer consumer, who have innovated around them, who have something to communicate, and are finding that the traditional agencies just don't understand how to do that. But yeah, I think that a couple of things getting in the way. I mean, there's inertia, right? Ken was talking about the fact that, I always like to say when the first baby boomer turned 18 in 1964, they put the mass in mass marketing. We didn't have electronic media. We didn't have plastic credit. We didn't have branding as we know it today, i.e. portfolios of brands existing in the same company and competing with each other for maximizing the gain for the corporation. And so all of a sudden, marketing evolved around this cohort. Ken calls it, the python and the pig, right? That group came of age in the 18 to 49 crosshairs that were created for them. And all of marketing's best practices, isms, philosophies, beliefs, practices were all optimized around this one generation, with the belief that once they exited the 18 to 49 cohort, there'd be just as many people with the same potency and power coming in at the bottom of that. And it simply isn't true, right? The millennials are 5 to 15 years away from their peak earning and spending periods. So I say to industries like gold, it shouldn't be a surprise that Tiffany's is up for sale right now, right? Who's buying all that stuff right now? Nobody, right? So I always say, what are you going to do for the next 5 to 15 years? And it's time to start thinking about embracing multiple cohorts at the same time for a massive brand.
So you have a couple of examples of that. Can you share those examples?
Yeah, the first one, I'll wait till it pops up here, is so there's this either or mentality in marketing, right? We're told that the best decisions we can make are when we make decisions, when we make choices. And so, what Susan was saying earlier is, well, we already have those consumers. So let's focus on the consumers we don't have. And the reality is, in today's world where we do have digital media that we can target with more discretion, it's possible to do end-to-end, to have multiple audiences that you're prioritizing in different ways, and therefore to be including the baby boomers. I moderated a panel at the International Auto Show. It was boomers versus millennials. I found that all the CMOs of these luxury cars were talking out of both sides of their mouth. I finally pinned down this one CMO of a major luxury brand, and I said, what's it going to be, a millennial or boomer? And she said, I would choose a millennial every time because I don't want to sell a baby boomer their last car. And the air, got sucked out of the room because, of course, we're not buying our last car. So what we admire is brands that are using storytelling, because storytelling is intergenerational. Storytelling is about feeling, right? People of age don't remember facts and figures as much as they remember how you made them feel. So I have two examples here of intergenerational storytelling that are done very well. And the Fitbit one was a daughter who buys her father a Fitbit, and they go work out, and he's miserably out of shape, but the Fitbit is getting him in shape, and eventually he's beating her up the hill. And we find out at the end that it's all because he's walking her down the aisle, and he wants to be at his best and she wants to be at her best. And it's just make every beat count. And there's the transferring of technological advice between generations, but just this fact that the millennials consider their parents to be among their best friends. There's a great relationship dynamic brought to life.